Is it hard to get into Yemen these days?
It's really hard to get. Most people can't get in there. It's only because this was through the United Nations.
I see.
Yeah, I don't. Americans, you can't go there. I think they like on their flag it might say like "Death to America" or something like that. I think
so. Were you ever concerned for your life there? Did you ever have did you have to go around with a bodyguard or?
Yeah, no. I had I had 6 cars with me. I had people with machine guns on the back of trucks with me everywhere, and got stuck there on my last day because there was this tribal fighting and the people were killing each other, and we couldn't go through where the conflict was.
Wow.
And so we were stuck in the bunker for an extra 2
Did you ever
days.
fear for your life?
I was kind of like, I was pretty stressed and, but there were these people that work there all the time and they're kind of like, this happens quite a bit. So they sort of eased my fears.
They eased your nerves?
Yeah. Because I was kind of like, man, well, they sent a mediator out there to help the situation and they killed the mediator. And so we're like, okay, we're not going anywhere. And just like, we're like, what?
They killed the mediator.
Yeah, they killed the mediator.
Now there's a strong message for you.
Yeah.
That's pretty brutal.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's pretty ballsy, man. Why Yemen? What made you?
Well, Richard, he's one of these guys he's lived in North Korea and all these places, and I've worked with him before. And, he loves doing creative projects and things like that. And I knew going in with him and his team that, they wouldn't throw me in a situation where it was like really dangerous. I mean, there's always a risk.
Yeah.
But
I think just going into Yemen sounds pretty risky.
Yeah, it's pretty risky. Yeah,
You do that in the box, and now you take that for granted. You just actually all the time.
Different technique that I utilize in able to.
But this wouldn't allow me from them, and I fall in love.
Mentor My Mix with Greg Gordon. Mentor My Mix.
All right. Hey, welcome back to the Mentor My Mix podcast. It's great to be here today. I have as my guest a man who in my circles, needs no introductions at all. He's one half of the trailblazing electronic duo Thievery Corporation, formed almost 30 years ago now, and he continues to cultivate an extraordinary career as a DJ and with his own Garza project. A man I know as someone who never wavers from his own authentic path, and someone who continues to move millions of music lovers around the world and across generations. Rob, welcome to the Mentor My Mix podcast.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you. It's great to see you again. It's been a minute, huh?
It's been a minute. Yeah, I think, I saw you maybe once during the pandemic or something. Yeah. It's good to be here.
Yeah.
Back where it all started.
That's right.
Yeah.
This is where it all started. Here, the original home of Pyramid. And I know you've been busy. You've been on tour quite a bit since pandemic hit, huh?
Yeah. Last year we had a pretty tour intensive year. We did about between 70 and 80 Thievery shows. And so that was a blast. But this year, we're kind of toning it down. I want to just make more space to be creative. And, as I get older, coming off the road, it's hard to just...
it's hard to readjust, right?
Readjust, yeah.
Let's play a track. This is kind of where it all began, right? I mean, this song really set the tone for you and Thievery, didn't it?
Yeah, this really put us on the map internationally.
It really did. Now, what year did this come out?
This came out in 1997.
Wow.
98, yeah.
I mean, this was really forward-thinking back then. You guys have always been forward-thinking, I think, and especially in terms of your reach into international-sounding music.
Yeah, so, it's wild because the sitar isn't an instrument you hear too much in popular music. And I was always, wondering, where did I get this love for the sitar? And I was thinking back because one time we were playing a show and my parents' friends came, and they were an Indian couple, and they babysat me with their kids when I was a kid. So I was around a lot of Indian food and Indian sound and things like that. And so I think that I heard a lot of Indian traditional music and things like that.
But then we go into this, and this is Brazilian, right? You got this.
Well, this
Brazilian
is
vibe
kind of this
here.
Loungy, element of the Brazilian element of jazz.
Of jazz.
Yeah.
So a lot of fusion here that I think ignited people's minds and really helped ignite Thievery Corporation. Huh?
Exactly. We met Pam Bricker back in Adams Morgan, this neighborhood in Washington, D.C. She was singing in cafes and bistros, and we used to just go and see her sing, late at night, and we'd have drinks, me and Eric.
Yeah.
And we're like, we should get her in the studio. So we brought her in, and, this is, I think, one of the first songs that we did together.
Yeah.
And she was an amazing singer. She passed away back in 2005. But she's, just, there was no one like her. Yeah.
Well, this kind of set the tone for many, many collaborations with incredible artists throughout your career here.
Yeah, and this was sort of the heyday of, trip hop, down tempo, kind of this sort of all these Balearic sort of genres and things happening. And it was a really exciting time because you had people out of Austria like Kruder and Dorfmeister, you had Massive Attack in Bristol, you had Gotan Project out of Paris, and working with Argentinian music. So it was very global, and it was a lot of fun. And the future seemed so bright, back then when we were coming up with this sound. And a lot of it was just throwing things together, throwing all these different influences and things that really inspired us, but were kind of weird, and just like,
totally.
And that came to be how we invented our signature Thievery sound.
Yeah. I mean, you say the future was so bright, and yet there's that interesting twist you throw into that with the name Thievery Corporation, right? There's a cynicalness to that, isn't there?
There is. Well, you can look at it from a couple different perspectives. One is kind of, it's almost like a statement on the world we live in, Thievery Corporation and things like that.
Which has come true even more so.
Even more, then. We live in a world with lots of Thievery Corporations. Yeah. And, but the other thing is, back in those days, people were really into sampling. And so the name also sort of alludes to that, like, taking samples from a lot of different places. So, and if you listen to a lot of, hip hop in the 90s, it's all samples and stuff. Right. And so we were really inspired by that music culture and, that sort of sample it, loop it, and change it and mess with it.
Now, what about this beat? Was this sampled and looped originally?
Yeah, that's a combination of a few beats. Mm-hmm. So a lot of times what we'll do is take just different drum loops and layer them with percussion, some electronic elements and things like that. So, you can't really say like, hey, that's that beat. It's not just a one stolen beat. Usually it's a
well, that's the way to do it, right? I mean, that's really the way to be creative. I mean, that's the whole idea behind sampling and looping. It's not just steal the beat and, that was what that came from. You kind of want to make it your own. Yeah. And you guys definitely did that here.
And I think, it was a great springboard for, aspiring musicians and producers, because the sampler was a way of having access to any drummers or instrumentalists, and if you didn't have $500,000 to have a studio and hire all these people, you could, create these songs in your bedroom.
Yeah. Well, now back then, I mean, sampling was still really an art form because you didn't have DAWs yet, like the way we do now, right?
Yeah, you didn't
have Ableton.
Yeah, no.
Right.
You had those like Akai and Roland samplers with the floppy disks and everything. And it was pretty...
with time compressors built into it. You had to do the formula and calculate the percentage to get it just the right tempo,
Exactly,
right? I remember that so well. I mean, we were doing the same thing here in San Francisco back in the late 90s. It's funny because lesser known, but we had a trip hop crew here producing tracks under the name Native Buds.
Oh, yeah. Very cool. Yeah.
And we were really influenced by Future Sound of London and groups like that. And then, of course, Thievery Corporation, and I think really Thievery, what you guys did more than anything for certainly my aesthetic and appreciation of music was introducing so many facets of international music.
Right.
And different genre, bleeding edge, blending of genres.
Yeah. I think when I met Eric, one of the things we had in common is that we had, just a very broad spectrum of music in our record collections. We had music from India, music from Jamaica, music from Brazil, jazz, old Italian soundtrack, vinyl from the 60s and things like that. And so, having access to all these pieces of vinyl, and when you're in that sort of sampling culture, you're just kind of taking everything and just trying to see what works and what loops kind of have legs and can kind of, inspire new ideas. And, there was something great about that energy, because I think a lot of times, the limitations kind of are what really push you to do the art.
Oh, yeah.
And if you have access to everything at, any moment, it kind of can, stifle your
It's
creativity.
overwhelming,
Yeah.
right? And it is overwhelming now. I mean, you have so much access to samples and loops and
you have
synths
access
and
to every sample.
a little too much.
Yeah. But back then, if you just had one, like piece of vinyl and you found something cool, then you're like, okay, we're going to do something with this. And you just kind of squeeze it like a lemon and get the juice out of it.
Get the juice going. I think it's like the Beatles. It had 4 tracks.
Yeah.
I mean, look what they did with 4 tracks.
Exactly.
Unbelievable.
I know.
Really quite incredible.
It's the same thing. You go to like Sun Studios, back in the day, and they just had like, 2 tracks. And they just would place people in the room and record the whole thing right there. But it's interesting, when we started Thievery, we actually, we didn't use any multi-track recording. We basically set up the sequencer, all the instruments. We ran the, drum machines and everything. But I used the MPC 3000, so we ran everything off of that.
Classic.
So it would take like 20 floppy disks to, get all the sounds.
Get it all loaded up.
Yeah, so we wouldn't turn it off for like 2 weeks, just leave it up. And we would just basically run it as a performance for like 2 weeks. We were in the 18th Street Lounge, which was Eric and his partner's club. We were in the liquor.
This is in D.C., right?
This was in D.C. So we were in the liquor room, and we'd go and we'd get something we thought was good, and we'd bounce it to DAT, and we'd go downstairs and play the DAT on the club system. And if it sounded like the other records that we loved, we'd be like, okay,
you had something.
We knew we had something. But if it didn't sound, we'd go back up. And so, we would run these songs for like a couple weeks. And then finally, when it was ready, we would bounce it to digital audio tape, which I don't think people even know what it is anymore.
I know what DATs were.
Yeah, DATs.
Those little suckers. I mean, I remember ADATs. And,
ADATs,
all of that stuff.
Yeah.
I'm glad we don't have to mess with those anymore.
I know, yeah.
But DAT was cool. Yeah, and you could run long mixes onto the DATs. Now, at that time, did you consider yourself a DJ?
I still don't really consider myself a DJ. I'm more like a put some records, I mean,
but you DJ some bomb sets. I've
yeah,
seen you DJ.
Yeah, but
how can you say that?
Because I kind of grew up in an era where you had sort of the, scratching and the real DJs and stuff like that.
So the authentic DJ to you is a different thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, yeah.
So
first and foremost, what do you consider yourself?
Well, when I was 14 or 15, my family moved to Connecticut, and they had an electronic music class as an elective. And it was just some guy who decided to get all this electronic music equipment. So there was step sequencers, modular synths, reel-to-reel tape decks, first drum machines coming out, and samplers and things like that. And I just had access to all this. So I would just start playing around with all this equipment. This is back in 1985. And then from there, I just started buying more electronic music equipment, keyboards, sequencers, things like that. And so I consider myself a producer. I like to tinker around and just fuck with shit until I get something cool. It's kind of just always like messing around. So, it sort of comes from that idea, like you're only limited by your imagination with electronic music. Like you don't have to be like a jazz or classical guy. And, I was always intimidated by real musicians, and electronic music let me, find a way to express myself without having to, basically do
like practice all the time.
Yes. Yeah, I could just go straight to the ideas,
well, that's cool. And at that age, what would you say were your primary influences at that young age?
Interestingly, I was very into like hardcore punk rock, like listening to like, a lot of things like Black Flag and Dead Kennedys and things like that, Minor Threat and that whole Discord scene in DC. And
there was a big scene in DC at that time. Huh?
And all of that just really gave me the idea that maybe I could do it myself too, you know, because all those bands, they've started their own record labels, put out their own music, and did it themselves. So, you know, I started making records when I was about 19 years old, and I would find the people that press and manufacture, call up different distributors, go to record stores, get them to put my piece of vinyl in the Tower Records and stuff.
You were hungry, determined, and singular of vision from a very early age. Right?
Yeah, I lived in a very sort of rednecky town in Maryland, and I knew nobody was going to come to get me to give me a break. You know, it's kind of like I have to make my own breaks.
Yeah, but I want to just pause on that thought right there for a second, because I think it's important for anybody listening to hear that and understand how much that drives success. Right, to having a singular vision, being super passionate, and being super determined. That's it. That's what you were going to do, right?
Yeah, you have to be sick with it. You know, if everybody tells you you suck and you're horrible or whatever. My parents didn't understand what electronic music was. I mean, they loved like Frank Sinatra and Sam Cooke and Elvis and all this stuff. And so they're like, what the hell is he doing in the basement? Electronic music? What is this stuff going on? But I didn't care. I didn't listen to anybody else. And I just tried to create my own opportunities. And any chance that I had, I would go out and meet people that were making music, hang out with them, start to create a community of people that were doing the things that I wanted to do too. And, you know, so forged those relationships and just kept, you know, working in the lab down there like a mad scientist.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. At what point did Eric come along? When did you guys cross paths?
So we crossed paths in 1995. Eric had a little studio in an apartment building, and he had a friend who was working there. And so I had a techno record that I needed mastered. So I went to Eric's studio without.
You were doing techno back then, huh?
Yeah, without ever meeting Eric. And then so I was working on this independent acid jazz label called Step Ahead, and this was back in 1995. And my partner at the time, he said, do you want to go to this house music club, or do you want to go to this brand new lounge that was opened by my friend Eric Hilton? They play bossa nova, jazz, dub, all this stuff.
Melting pot.
Yeah, and beats. And I was like, I want to go check that out. And so I went to the lounge, and Eric was at the door.
Was this a 21 and over place at that point?
Yeah. So I was about 25. And, you know, they were playing like one of my favorite songs in the whole world by Antonio Carlos Jobim called Aguas de Marzo. And I heard that, and I'm just like, it was like a sign, like, okay, this place was like, you know, and it's a place that, you know, in all my travels, I've never been to a place like that still. And, you know, it was just dedicated to the type of music that we did.
Yeah.
And so I met Eric, and he's like, are you Juju Thievery Corporation? Because that used to be my record label, Juju Thievery Corporation.
Oh.
And he's like, I always thought that was the coolest name. And then when we started making music, he suggested like, oh, we should just take off the Juju and let's just call ourselves Thievery Corporation. And so, yeah, and we just started making music. And in those days, you know, I don't think people understand, like, people had to have equipment. Like if you had if I have a MPC 3000 and you have a keyboard, or so-and-so has a drum machine, then you all get together and you can make music.
Yeah.
Now with the laptop, anybody can do anything, anywhere, all the time. But back in the day, you know, so I had like an MPC 3000. Eric had a ASR 10. Like, okay, let's get together. We'll put our music together, and then we'll start a production duo or whatever.
Right. And that hence the whole live sequence thing where you guys keep all the gear on, load up all the sounds.
Yeah.
How long did it take to get to that point?
Well, you know, right when we met, we're like, let's get together and put our equipment. And I think Eric had this group called Exodus Quartet, this project he was doing. And we did a song for one of his projects. And then we realized that we worked really well together. We were really, you know, quick and prolific. And so we just started Thievery Corporation. And
so that was what year?
95.
So pretty soon thereafter, you came up with Lebanese Blonde. It wasn't that long.
About 97. So yeah, first year we were basically in the studio just making music. And then we decided to put out pieces of vinyl. So the first one was a track called 2001 Spliff Odyssey. And the next one was Shaolin Satellite. And we were just getting all this like feedback from all over the world. Like people loved these things. So we decided to put out a CD later that year, or 96. And people just started like buying it like hotcakes. And I quit my day job and, never looked back. And, it's just great to be, that's what I do. I do music. And from there, it's just like, it was really interesting because the way people discovered music a lot too was through compilations.
Yeah.
And we would be on like a Cafe Del Mar compilation or Buddha Bar compilation. And that's kind of way a lot of
I remember the Buddha Bar compilations.
All those things,
great.
And
I used
so
to
like
listen to that a lot. Yeah.
And a lot of people discovered a lot of like early electronic, music from the 90s, electronic music from the 90s that way. And really spurred a scene, and it's pretty cool because it was an era right as the internet was starting to happen, but hadn't really happened yet,
Yeah. And so how did you guys start to come up with all the amazing singers and artists that you would collaborate with over the years that became ultimately the touring Thievery Corporation?
Yeah.
But so many, I mean, you really have worked with an incredible amount of different artists over the years.
Yeah. One of the things I think that people don't realize is that Washington, D.C. is a very cosmopolitan city. You have all the embassies there for all the different countries. So there's communities that are, come with the ambassadors and everything. So on this one street in D.C. in Adams Morgan, back at the time, you'd have like a Argentinian cafe next to a West African place, next to a reggae club, next to a Brazilian, bar or whatever. And we would just go to these bars and drink and be like, you sound great. We're taking you in the studio, And so we would just take people from like, these little bars and just bring them back to our studio, which was about the size of this at the time, and just, just fuck around, really,
And then what was the kind of the impetus that got Thievery on tour? How did you do that? What was the first manifestation of a Thievery Corporation tour?
Yeah, well, we had two friends, Roots and Z, and they were like, these reggae singers in Washington,
kind of
D.C.
Jamaica dance hall.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
And so we saw them and we thought they were great. So we basically, we would go and play our own music and they would basically toast and sing on top of it. And we also got Pam Bricker, who sang Lebanese Blonde. So the three of them would come out with us and we would play our music. But me and Eric at the time, we would be like, we'd get a CD player, put it on the stage, and we would sit at a table playing cards and just hit play on the CD. Because we're not really doing anything. Our work is already done. Our work is in the studio.
It's in the studio,
And so, for us, we're like, why even pretend that we're doing anything?
Oh, that's so funny.
But after a while, we started to bring some of the keyboards and add, layers and stuff and to what we're doing. So
yeah.
And then now we have like a full on band.
Oh yeah, I've seen you multiple
real
times.
Drummer, bass player,
sitar player,
everything. So we've come a long way since then. But yeah, when we found these singers, we would just keep adding people to the band, like these musical hitchhikers from this bar, like, oh, you're coming with us on tour, and we got a percussion player, and then it just sort of snowballed, and now we're about 10 people.
That's a big operation.
Yeah.
Now, how many records have you done as Thievery? You done like 10, 11?
10, 11, something like that. Yeah.
So after Lebanese Blonde, what was the next biggest thing for you guys? How did you take off from there? What was the the next thing that kind of kicked things into gear for you guys?
Well, the next album after that was Richest Man in Babylon, after the Mirror Conspiracy. And that record did really well and got us touring all around the world. And, the audience.
Yeah, that's legendary at this point.
Yeah.
That album.
So that was really kind of just, throwing fuel on the fire. And that was really great. But I think the next big thing creatively was the Cosmic Game, and we got a chance to work with our musical heroes, people like David Byrne,
right,
Perry Farrell from Jane's Addiction, and the Flaming Lips,
Uh-huh.
and that was fun to do because, it's just great to collaborate.
Right. And you got to work with them in the studio and work with David Byrne. What was it like to work with David Byrne?
Well, David Byrne, we didn't work with in the studio because he was traveling and stuff. And so, back in those days too, some of it was like, you would FedEx a DAT tape.
Sure.
And stuff, which is so crazy to think about. But he actually came down to visit our studio one time in DC because he wanted to hang out with us. And he was a fan of what we were doing. He actually wanted us to like be his band on tour, but me and Eric weren't really a band at the time. So we're like, what are we going to do?
So he was checking you guys out,
kind
right?
of in a way, yeah. And, he came down to hang out with us, and, we're hanging out with him at the bar and everything because our studio was in a bar.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, which always was kind of messy anyways, but because you have the liquor distributors coming in and they're like, oh, do you want to try the new whiskey or whatever? Then the wine guys are coming. And this is like 2:00 in the afternoon.
Oh, yeah.
And the bar isn't even opened up yet.
Yeah.
And then everyone comes in like to happy hour, 5:30. Everyone's drinking. And then you're out till like 3 a.m, when the bar closes.
The life.
Yeah. You can only do that when you're in your 20s, I would never even think to attempt something like that these days. But at any rate, so we met David Byrne, and he asked us to do a remix for him. And then we did a collaboration with him on a song called The Heart is a Lonely Hunter.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And how did that ultimately, like, when you collaborated with him, was that just the DATs coming in and you guys chopping up DAT stuff, resampling it? And then,
Basically, the DATs are coming in, and then we were uploading it to the computer at this point, and then we're kind of like picking out the best parts and editing things and rearranging the songs so that everything fits.
And at that point, did you have like a favorite engineer that you guys were working with? Or did you like kind of create a production relationship in the studio?
Yeah, we had our in-house engineer, a guy named Stone, who was really talented and great. And he worked with us. And I mean, one of the things too about, those years, we really kind of went to the studio like 5 days a week, at least for like 6 hours a day.
Wow. Yeah.
And we would just come up with ideas, and just eventually just have, all this material. But we were just adamant about just, being in there and doing that.
Right. Well, you certainly had the advantage of being in an era where CD sales were still a thing.
Yeah.
Right? And you could make a lot more money from just selling recorded music.
Exactly.
Right?
I mean, those were the golden days of being an artist because, we had a few record deals that were offered to us, each for over $1 million. And we turned them down because we got a packaging and distribution deal from this company called Caroline.
Oh, yeah.
And so they basically would give us $8 a CD. And we would
big difference than getting 14 or 15%, huh?
Yeah,
and paying back that $1 million.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We would be getting probably like $1.25 or $1.50 a CD if we signed with a major label.
Yeah.
So for us as an independent label, we sold, the first release 200,000 copies at $8 a CD. You can do the math.
That's damn good.
Yeah. And then at that time, people were paying like crazy money for licensing. Like we would get our music license on car commercials, whatever, Bacardi rum or whatever, and they'd pay you like $100,000 and things like. It was the time during the .com bubble, and so people were just kind of like throwing away money, like just was ridiculous.
Did you get more money for that than like what you got for the Garden State? Because didn't you got Lebanese Blonde licensed into the film The Garden State?
Yeah. We basically, we got a fax one day from Zach Braff. Like, oh, I'm doing this independent movie, like to license Lebanese Blonde. We're like, okay, we'll see if this does anything. But, we did it. I mean, he was an actor, right? So it wasn't like he was a big director. It was kind of like it was a a movie that came out and just exploded. It kind of had it's like a cult thing, and that song, was on that soundtrack, and the soundtrack went on to win a Grammy.
That's right.
Yeah, and so
that was a big moment.
That was a big moment. Yeah, people really started to learn, who's Thievery Corporation. Yeah, and that was a trip.
Yeah, and that's now I guess that's really turned into a touring career for you more than anything, right? But I'm sure you guys are still streaming. You're streaming like I noticed on your Spotify account like 2 million listens a month or more.
Yeah,
that's pretty darn good too.
Yeah,
huh?
I mean we've been at it for a while. We're like,
yeah,
this is 28 years in the music industry. I feel like it might as well be like 100. It's like almost like dog years or something.
It's incredible. I mean, most people are lucky if they get 1 or 2. You know, and you've managed to stay creative and stay in the studio and stay fresh and relevant, and that's being proven even more so now with your new Garza project, huh?
Yeah.
And
with that, I mean, I'm always interested in a lot of different forms of music, so this is actually kind of a bit more sort of has some disco and some pop elements and things like that. There's
a big 80s influence in this,
yeah,
right?
There
this
is
a real, synth pop.
Exactly, and those are things that really captivated me as a kid as well. When I first heard the synthesizer, back in the day, like hearing like Gary Newman cars and things like that, and I would just be like, "What is this sound?" And recently I got a chance to open for Duran Duran at the Chase Center, and
as Garza with your band?
No, I was just DJing.
Well, don't say just DJing, but you're opening. That's pretty cool, man.
So I was DJing, and it's kind of wild because I was thinking back, because I used to have their records, when I was like 11 and stuff, and I was always one day like, I wish I could do what they do. And then to actually be sharing the stage with them was like a really, big
your own dream come true.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, wow,
cool.
That's pretty.
And were they still fresh and relevant? You think? How did they come off? I don't.
They
remember.
came off great. I mean, it's just so nostalgic. It's like a trip down memory lane.
Yeah, totally.
It's like going to see Depeche Mode too. Like it's one of those bands. It's just like, the music's so great. So
this you do have a band though as Garza, right?
I do, yeah.
What's Enemy Planes? Is that right?
Enemy Planes. Yeah, his name's Casey or Yesek from he's from Minneapolis.
Yeah,
and he has a great voice.
Yeah,
really good.
I've heard him. He sounds great. I remember coming one day with our mutual friend Micah.
Yes,
who dragged me down to go see you guys rehearse one night. That was really fun.
Yeah. No, it's great. I mean, I love the live element of doing music. So I wanted to, have this project, even though it's very electronic oriented, to still have that live element.
Yeah.
And I think, there's something, I mean, I enjoy DJing, but it's nice to just kind of have that camaraderie with people and you're all heading in the same direction and you're kind of like, going into towns and playing your music. And, that there's a big part of that that's fun for me and just the whole musical and creative aspect of that as well.
Yeah, well, you get to pick up the guitar, you get to play guitar, you get to play keys, right?
Yeah, exactly. And work with, some really talented people. We have a singer, Leia. She goes by La Freak, and I saw her in Las Vegas. She was playing Amy Winehouse at the Cosmopolitan.
Gotta have a good voice to play Amy Winehouse.
Yeah.
Right? You can't get by without a good voice playing Amy Winehouse.
And then we have another guy, Steve Downs from Ireland. Who,
that's cool.
Yeah, he did this famous track called Want You in My Soul with Lovebirds. And he's just a great singer, great guy, really fun to be on the road with too. So
that's cool. That's important, right?
Yeah.
To have people that you want to be around and hang, because you spend a lot of time with the people you're on the road with, right?
Yeah,
I've noticed a theme though. Like I've seen some of your music videos, which I think are really cool. By the way, I like the directing on them. I like the cinematography that you do on these. And there seems to be like a theme that I've noticed. And correct me if I'm wrong. Do you have like a chasing thing, like the thing about being chased, or like, is this like a dream sequence for you?
Yeah, no, I don't know. Well, we worked with these kids who are really talented. When I say kids, I mean people in their 20s. So I'm 52. So
yeah, I'm right there with you.
So we worked with these young guys who are extremely talented, and so they sort of came up with this idea for one of the videos. But I don't know. I think there's a Thievery video where we're being followed and chased.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I think there's a couple of them. You know?
Yeah, that's
like,
what I mean. I've noticed
yeah.
that. It's kind of a thematic thing a little bit.
Well, it's always tough to do video, like with Thievery specifically, when you're the producer.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we're both the producers, so like, we're two guys. You know, where are you going to put the two guys? Or we're following,
Right.
we're stalking this singer or whatever.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
just kind of like funny and weird.
So, all right. So let's check out this track. This is Summer's Hours.
Mhm.
This is a Garza track. And tell us a little. Maybe you can tell us a little bit
Okay.
about this track as we listen to it here. Kind of got a little housey undertone.
Yeah,
in the
definitely.
groove, right?
Yeah.
That kick.
Yep.
So
So this song is called Summer is Ours, and we wrote it during the pandemic, and we were like, when summer finally opens up, you know, it's like, it was a song sort of meant for that, like, you know, summer's ours, let's throw it away, you know,
Yeah, yeah.
like let's, it sort of has this nihilistic, it has this nihilistic sentiment about it, like let's just fucking go crazy. You know?
yeah. And this came so out of the pandemic. Did you feel pretty isolated in the pandemic? How did you feel?
I was doing a lot of Zoom DJ things,
Yeah.
and so I had
Were you
to-
twitching?
a little bit of that. So
Uh-huh.
I had a setup at my home, and what happens is a lot of people would come to my apartment because they knew I had a DJ setup. So then my place just became like this sort of like, you know, party den for
Little COVID party den.
yeah, COVID party den. You know.
Cool.
So yeah, it was and
Was that here in San Francisco?
I was here in San Francisco.
Yeah.
And it was the first time in like the last 20 years where I haven't toured.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't even know what life was like not touring for like a full year. And I was
Wow.
like, and I got a lot of time to spend with my son,
Yeah, that's right.
to just be outside, to build healthy routines.
Yeah, that's great.
So
Yeah.
I really sort of embraced it, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you took the time to record this, or to produce this album, right?
Yeah, produce this album. And then so this is something I did recently, which is in the last year. This is a sort of, I call it G's Dust Up, and it's kind of more housey,
Right.
daytime disco type vibe of one of the songs from the album.
So this is really a remix from the
It's
album.
really, yeah, it's kind of, yeah, a remix, and you know, I wanted to make it a bit more like electronic, and this song actually has been having a lot of legs. Like,
Yeah.
this is probably, I mean, people just really love the song, so.
You know what I really loved though was the production of the album itself.
Mm-hmm.
It struck me because I got to work with you a little bit in the studio when we did Raymana.
Right, yep.
And you were, doing
Yeah.
your first, I think, explorations
Yeah,
as
yeah.
a solo artist.
Yep.
And when I heard what you did on the record, I was like, wow, this is really cool.
Yeah.
Because it showed me that, you were not trying to pigeonhole yourself or trying to just go after that. I'm a DJ now, electronic.
Right, yeah.
You really kind of pushed the creativity envelope by trying to really produce a live band sound.
Yeah.
And synthy, but live at the same time. With
Yeah.
some great vocals. I thought it was awesome.
Yeah, that was really the intention with that, is kind of, take those things that I love about rock music, about like 80s new wave as well, and kind of bring them together, different singers, different instrumentation, not just being electronic, like you said, like a,
You could have
EDM
easily
thing.
done that, right?
Yeah.
You could have just kind of fallen into that
Yeah.
and like, okay, I'm a DJ now, right?
Yeah.
But you really resisted that, and I really respect that, quite
Yeah,
frankly.
no, and it's, I just love so many different forms of music,
Yeah.
and I'm just always kind of searching and
Yeah.
loving and enjoying different sounds. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. So how did you go about producing that? What studios, where did you go to do that?
So I
'Cause
was
clearly
work-
you must have worked in some studios to do that, right?
Well, so I was working with these guys, Smile, in Los Angeles, and so I rented a room with them, and they are amazing producers. And so I had a room there, and the studio was in my room. It's my bedroom.
Would you say like when you say you had a room, it's like a rehearsal room or
No,
what was
a
it?
bedroom. I had a bedroom in this
okay.
group house with all these like 23-year-old kids.
Oh, awesome.
And so, but they're all like producers. So we would just sit there and just
Uh-huh.
like, they're like vaping and we're drinking and just like it. And, there's no fancy equipment at all. There's just a microphone right here and, just coming up with things. Like I would have these sketches and things like that, and then we would develop them together and bring singers in. Someone would come for some other session and be like, "Oh, come in here and do you want to try singing on this track?"
Yeah.
And so a lot of the vocal performances happened that way, but it was just like very like not glamorous at all, but like really fun and really effective. And the what came out of it is great.
And you do the sketches in Ableton?
Yeah. That's kind of my main thing when it comes to sketching. So it'd be in Ableton, and then get the ideas going, and then we set it up in Pro Tools.
Yeah.
These guys work in Pro Tools, so
Yeah.
And then we go from there.
Yeah. I remember doing the same thing with you when you
yeah,
came to
that's
studio.
right. Yeah.
I took everything into Pro Tools, and we spent some time mixing those
You're
tracks.
a Pro Tools guy.
I'm both. I love Ableton.
Yeah.
I'm happy to take a track now from start to finish in Ableton, but I definitely like mixing in Pro Tools. There are definitely some advantages to it.
Yeah. Oh, that's a whole.
Yeah. And now you're doing something really cool. You're actually working with the United Nations World Food Program. Right? In Yemen in particular?
Yeah. So I've been a global ambassador for them for over a decade, and I've traveled to places like Southern Sudan and Nepal. In Nepal, I was with the country director, Richard Reagan, and he took me flying in helicopters around Mount Everest to Buddhist monastery.
How cool is
monasteries and things like that, and going and seeing these feeding programs and things like that. And then we did another thing where we raised money so that these young ladies could scale Mount Everest. And they were like from this one tribe, and they were the first woman of that tribe to make it up there. And so I've been involved with them for a while and been wanting to do something again, but then the pandemic happened. We had something lined up, and then my friend Richard, he's a country director for Yemen, so he's in Yemen.
What does that mean to be a country director? I don't think I've heard that before.
So he's a country director for the World Food Program. So the World Food Program.
Okay.
So he basically they feed over 20 million people there. Wow. And so he's in charge of all that and trying to. There's so many different conflicts going on between the Houthis, and then you have all the different tribes and all sorts of things.
That's complicated.
It's very complicated. There was a former leader of Yemen who said, ruling Yemen is like dancing on the heads of snakes.
Oof.
So anyway, he asked me if I wanted to come to Yemen, and I'm like, okay. So we're like, but what can we do, to raise awareness or do anything? So I'm like, well, what if we work with musicians from Yemen? Because right now in Yemen, you can't sing if you're like a woman in public or anything like that. That's not allowed. Or and music's mainly for religious and like weddings and things like that. So we decided to work with refugee musicians outside of Yemen. And so but it was a really incredible experience. So
wait, how did you connect to refugee musicians? I mean, did they kind of help?
Well, they got
the dots,
they got me to Yemen, and then one of the people on the team went and talked to people in different places like Istanbul and Cairo. So I went there, and they sort of made the connections.
So Turkey, Egypt, and then connected,
and then I went to Yemen. So and just giving people a voice, because people, they just hear Yemen and they think war. It's just I don't know anything what's going on over there, but I know it's really messed up.
It doesn't humanize it, right?
So
what you're doing is humanizing this to the rest of the world in many ways.
And showing their culture and, and what they're about and telling their stories. And so I'm doing this documentary right now.
Cool.
Working with these young musicians, met with the first Arab woman to win the Nobel Peace Prize. So, she's in there, and there's young actors and stuff and musicians, and it's a nice gateway into the culture, and there's music that will be coming out along with it. So
so you get to record. So this really becomes a new platform for you in a way of musical expression and creativity that integrates all of that culture of music into what you do again. Yeah,
things that I love. I love traveling. I love doing music. I love helping people tell their stories.
Yeah,
I love doing things that have a good intention, in terms of just showing how that, we're more similar than we are different.
That's not the truth.
And I think people, we live in an era where we really focus on the differences.
Yeah.
And music is kind of one of those things that can kind of, transcend that.
Yeah, break down the boundaries, the barriers of.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is it hard to get into Yemen these days?
It's really hard to get. Most people can't get in there. It's only because this was through the United Nations.
I see.
Yeah, I don't. Americans, you can't go there. I think they on their flag it might say like "Death to America" or something like that. I think
so. Were you ever concerned for your life there? Did you ever have did you have to go around with a bodyguard or?
Yeah, no. I had I had 6 cars with me. I had people with machine guns on the back of trucks with me everywhere, and got stuck there on my last day because there was this tribal fighting and the people were killing each other, and we couldn't go through where the conflict was.
Wow.
And so we were stuck in the bunker for an extra 2
Did you ever
days.
fear for your life?
I was kind of I was pretty stressed, and but there were these people that work there all the time, and they're kind of like, this happens quite a bit, so they sort of eased my fears.
They eased your nerves.
Yeah. Because I was kind of like, man. Well, they sent a mediator out there to help the situation, and they killed the mediator. And so we're like, okay, we're not going anywhere, and just like we're like, what?
They killed the mediator.
Yeah, they killed the mediator.
Now there's a strong message for you.
Yeah.
That's pretty brutal.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's pretty ballsy, man. Why Yemen? What made you?
Well, Richard, he's one of these guys he's lived in North Korea and all these places, and I've worked with him before. And, he loves doing creative projects and things like that. And I knew going in with him and his team that, they wouldn't throw me in a situation where it was like really dangerous. I mean, there's always a risk.
Yeah.
But
I think just going into Yemen sounds pretty risky.
Yeah, it's pretty risky. Yeah, but yeah.
And so, did you pay for this yourself? Was this something you were able to you funded for your own experience, or was it co-funded?
It was co-funded by me, WFP, in terms of the travel getting me to Yemen. And then I have another friend who's doing the documentary, and then he basically donated, all the camera footage, editing, stuff like that. So it's like people coming together to help tell this story about the people there and what's happening in the, there's a oppression of when it comes to freedom of expression and things like that. So the whole right to just express yourself doesn't exist there. I mean, there were some pretty crazy, messed up stories that we heard about people that were persecuted for just doing music.
Yeah. What's your big takeaway from the Yemen story there? Can you encapsulate it for us at all in terms of?
Yeah, well, I think, one of the things is to really be grateful that we live in a place where we can express ourselves and have this outlet to do all these creative things. And some places that'll get you killed, and just how people, even when music isn't part of the culture, or they leave or they flee, it's something that's still part of their soul. It's like people remember the songs from when they were kids, everywhere, all these things. And that art and music is really what makes us human, and it's an amazing thing.
Yeah. Did you fly some Yemeni
no,
artists
so
out?
The refugees were in those cities.
Oh, I see.
Those are like,
because they were refugees, so
Yeah.
they got out,
Yeah.
and they were. I see.
And they're trying to make it, and they're really struggling to. I mean, you think it's tough making a living doing music here in the U.S. Over there it's like pretty close to impossible.
So I got to ask, did you pay them? Did you pay them to record? How did that work out?
Well, they are. First of all, everybody wanted to do this, and so we're just like, everybody wants to tell their story and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So there hasn't been any sort of thing like when we went there, we didn't even really know what we were doing, to be honest. We're like, okay,
Yeah.
let's just do this.
See
Let's
how it unfolds.
see how it unfolds. Let's
Yeah.
just get in the car and see where, we wind up. And so now we started to look at the footage and we're like, there's a story here. So now we're looking at doing a concert with them. And,
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah. And so they would actually get to perform for the first time. And so, so they would be, the money would go to them and, their communities and things like that. So, yeah.
So that's great. You're actually creating an economic driver for them to not only express themselves, but then to ultimately perform for the world and tell their story.
And tell
to the
their
world.
story, yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So we're going to get to hear some of this stuff maybe late summer or early fall or winter this year.
Yeah.
It's going to be coming out. And there's going to be a documentary? Is that
There's a
right?
documentary, yeah. So we just, this friend of mine who does film and stuff in LA, he sent a cameraman with us.
Yeah.
And we just were like, let's just grab whatever we can.
Yeah.
And then and then we started to, look at it and we're like, there's something here. So
And what's any plans for the Garza band at this point? What's happening with that?
we're playing Bottle Rock
Yeah.
here.
That's
and
cool.
we're going to be doing some touring between now and the end of the year.
Nice.
And I'm just constantly like putting out music all the time and just kind of, I think, my strategy is just to be putting out music like every month.
Yeah, and surprise, surprise,
Yeah.
30 years later, you've made an incredible career out of this. And you're one of the blessed ones to be able to do that and do it at the level that you do it at so consistently, and it's pretty amazing.
And I feel really blessed.
Yeah, blessed, but it's also tenacity, obviously,
Yeah.
and just a relentless desire to be creative and to create.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's shown. Just
Well, that's what when your creative outlet is your fun, it's the best of all worlds.
right. You're not working.
Yeah, you're not working. So it doesn't feel like work. It feels like I'm kind of slacking, to be honest.
Okay, so any other releases that we can expect coming out of Garza? What's coming out next? Since you're a monthly releaser now.
Yeah, so I'm doing this track called Mexico.
Mexico. Okay.
Yeah, with this artist named Tone Ranger.
Cool.
He's from the Southwest, from Santa Fe.
Yeah.
And he has this cool deserty vibe. So he performs. He has his guitar and there's a lot of electronic elements, and it's really cool.
Yeah.
So this track is a remix that I did for him, and it has this sort of spaghetti western house type
Nice.
feel, which is
Okay.
very kind of interesting.
Yeah. That sounds
and
like
it-
it's a Garza thing. I can see that.
Yeah, it's a mixture of styles and things like that. So that's coming out, and then I have a song with Lulu from Thievery.
Yeah.
And it'll be on Garza.
And this is all on
project.
your own label, right? You're
Yeah.
continuing to put this out on was it Magic Moon or
Magnetic Moon.
Magnetic Moon? Sorry, that's right.
Yeah, and
Magnetic Moon. Yeah.
so the song with her is basically a sort of disco house track. It's really fun.
Cool.
Yeah, kind of reminiscent of like Heart of Glass type thing. So I'm really excited about that. My friend Doug Emancipator is doing a remix for one of the Garza tracks. So just lots of,
Nonstop, man.
things,
Nonstop Garza.
Yeah,
I love it. So we do have you sent me one other track you wanted to play here. I'm curious why this one, Amerimaca, right?
Yeah, we could play that. This is
Well, we could play anything you want to play, really, but these were the three that you had sent over. So I'm curious why this track.
Why this track? It's just a track that, well, first of all, I love this track. It's
Let's check it out here. Let's go.
Yeah.
I love that. That's
Yeah.
cool. Dubby guitar synthy
yeah.
thing. Yeah.
And this really, kind of is all about our dub influences, starting. And I just, I love this song and just wanted to include it. The singer on here is Notch. So he was in this band called Born Jamaicans back in the day, and me and Eric had his vinyl from back in the 80s. So we figured we'd give him a call, and we invited him to the studio, came down, and this is kind of one of probably another one of our most popular songs.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, and
There's that dance hall vibe.
exactly, yeah. And so this is like a fan favorite, one of my favorites. So it's just like, and this was like, I feel at this time we were like fully immersed in doing things on the computer, and this is like, a very special time in our recording.
What year was this released?
This was 2005.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so
Primetime Thievery.
Primetime Thievery, yeah. It's wild, you know.
Mm-hmm.
It's crazy to be here all these years later.
So I can't help but want to ask this. So are we ever going to see a Vegas run for Thievery?
Maybe we'll combine it with Cirque du Soleil or something, you know, the Thievery, something, you know. Belly dancers and,
yeah,
you know, and
right?
like, yeah.
I could see it.
You never know. Who knows?
You never know.
You never know. Yeah.
So true.
Yeah, but that would be a trip.
That sure would. Yeah, this is such a chill track. I love it.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, Rob, this has been so much fun.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been a blast.
Yeah, this has been great. So good to see you again. I hope we get to hang out more, man, while you're
Let's
in town.
do it. Well, now I know where your secret lair is.
I'll
be over there. Yeah.
I got a full bar back there, you know.
Really?
Not to mention a
What?
Meyer sound system and DJ decks and all, you know.
Why am I drinking water?
Well, you know, I had to get you through the podcast.
Very good. Touche.
Yeah, it's all good. Rob, thanks so much for being
Thanks
here, man.
for having me, man.
Yeah.
All
And this is a great track to end on. Mentor My Mix is made possible by Pyramid Music and Audio Production Institute. Evolve your sound with expert trainers and up-to-date courses designed to fit the needs of emerging artists and producers looking to build careers in the music and game audio industries. Go to pyramid.com for details on the San Francisco campus and online programs. Remember, if you have a guest suggestion or want to contact me for any reason, we have a contact form on the Mentor My Mix website. That's mentormymix.com. Or feel free to email me at greg@mentormymix.com.